Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Hello, Alyse. Welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Yuri. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I'm excited to see what we talk about.
Excellent. Well, to start off with, because there are so many things that you're working on these days, how do you describe yourself and what you do?
Most recently, I stumbled upon some language around human evolution that I'm kind of in love with, and that could change next week. But I really love how much we're learning about the brain science that backs up a lot of the developmental work that I do. I work really in the conversation of human development. Often I put it under the umbrella of leadership development because a lot of us are more willing to strive to be better leaders than we there's some way that if we're working on our personal development that people get in their heads a little bit about making themselves wrong or there must be something wrong or need to be fixed, which is not it at all. But we're all evolving, and I love being a player in the evolution of people on their journey in their at work, at home, in their lives. And so that's how I'm describing it this week.
Oh, sure, which is great. So how deep into brain science then do you get for your own practice in your work with your clients?
Well, so I'm definitely more of a dabbler. There are people who have deeply, David Rock, and, there are people who are deeply in the conversation, that I learn from. And so I don't in any way put myself out there as an expert. And as someone who's been doing developmental work for, 15 years, there's a way that the science is catching up when it's see, I knew it. And it actually makes it more palatable, more available for a wider group of people, which for me is wonderful because the more people that can benefit from these conversations, from an expanded awareness, the better. So.
Oh, definitely. So what did you originally study in college?
It's so funny because I have a 17-year-old daughter who's figuring out, she's a junior, and there's so much pressure about she's everyone knows but me. And I'm even the people who know don't really know, sweetheart. Right. But, you can't tell anyone that because she's 17 and she's a wonderful kid. Don't get me wrong. I adore her. But it's really stressful. And, I hilariously use my degree more than almost anyone I know because I studied interpersonal communication.
Oh, wonderful.
And actually at 19 led 2 labs of interpersonal communication courses. I taught 2 different labs. And so I essentially was leading groups through these exercises to create more awareness, which isn't exactly what I do right now, but it's a lot of what I do right now. And some of those early conversations that I took away from that work, I still utilize. And the other focus was organizational development. And I did change management for years. So I really feel accidentally, I'll be really straight with you, I do a lot of what I studied.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It's wonderful that has worked out and kind of been with you throughout your career. So when you graduated, what did you end up getting into shortly thereafter?
So I was at the time, I worked my way through school. I paid for my education, and I saved up so that I could work for a bookstore my last year of college. I worked at a bank until, and I saved up so that I could afford to take the pay cut to work at the bookstore because we had this fantastic bookstore where I grew up. It was an independent bookstore, and it was before it was actually not only before Amazon, but it was before Barnes & Noble and Borders got really big. And we were one of the top 5 bookstores in the country, and it was in my own backyard. And when I graduated, they had just expanded and they needed someone to do training because they were hiring so much, and they were hiring so much, and they had nothing documented. So my first job was doing training and development for this bookstore called Books and Company, and I worked for these 2 amazing entrepreneurs, Annie Kamara and Joe Neary, and they gave me so much license to expand what that meant, because they didn't have a training person before that. So I got myself into all kinds of interesting things, and it was wonderful.
Oh, great. So when was it that you decided to, I guess in your career, branch off and start your own company?
Well, so the bookstore went through a couple of ownership changes, and the last ownership change happened, well, actually, the second ownership change happened right as I was diagnosed with cancer. Oh, okay. And so it was an interesting time because, I actually loved working because it was like the only time that I didn't have to think about having cancer, right? And it was really, I really think I poured my heart into that work. And then when the next change came, when they sold the store again, because I had done the training of everyone in the whole store, I had a different relationship with all of the systems than most people. I had this really big view. And anyway, the short version is I had a pretty pivotal role in the second transition and was then hired to be the training director for the chain that purchased the store. Okay. And that was awesome until they wanted me to move where their headquarters were. And I had just finished chemo, and I was like, I don't think it makes sense for me to move by myself someplace with no one I know. And right. And in the time that I worked in the store, I was really active with our industry group, teaching classes on running bookstores. And so I was able to leave that job on very good terms. I just didn't want to move. And I had a couple of people actually in Boston. I did a fair amount of work with a couple of stores there and went. And I thought, well, I can pay my mortgage for, 3 to 6 months doing these consulting gigs until I go find a new job. And that would give me more time to heal. It was like a nice blend. And then, that turned into 3 years. And then I figured, well, if I'm going to be a consultant, I should go find out how real consultants do it. Yeah. So that was when I applied to work for Accenture and did change management with Accenture for a while. So. Okay.
Oh, cool. So when you were first getting involved in consulting, were there books that you read or people that you talked to, or was it just kind of an organic process?
Oh gosh, I talked to everyone. I'm sure there were books I read. Actually, absolutely. So I am a huge fan of the E-Myth, Michael Gerber, and he really talks about how systems are so critical to any kind of business. And no one goes into business to create systems. They go into business because they're passionate about whatever it is they're passionate about. Right. And so he just did such a nice job of explaining how to create systems to make your life easier, to make your life better. And then honestly, at that same time, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, which I know is tried and true, which I know is kind of an oldie but a goodie, but that really had me thinking in a more expansive way. And then I just talked to everyone about, and in some ways I was pretty young. And so in some ways it was easy because I could just say, treat me like I know nothing. Tell me. And people were really willing to treat me like I knew nothing and tell me what they thought I should do. And some of it, and most of it was pretty great. Things about taking care of all of the details end to end and not assuming people, a lot about follow up, and the world was so different then because it was before smartphones. And so The communication was slower, but it was great. It was, I feel really, really blessed by how many people were, supported me during that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's wonderful. So when was it that you decided to get involved in coaching and become a business coach?
Well, so I did corporate for a while, and then in 2008, when the world was changing so fast, I was working for a tech company at the time here in Seattle, and mm-hmm. because downsizing was kind of the way to go, I took an opportunity, I raised my hand to say, hey, I would like to take one of those packages. I would like to eliminate myself. I had a 2 and a 4-year-old at the time, and I live on Bainbridge Island, which is a ferry ride away from Seattle. And I felt like I felt like I was living 2 lives. And so I raised my hand. And again, it's kind of funny because I didn't realize this until right now speaking about it, but that essentially bought me 3 months to find the next thing. And I thought I would start a business. I ended up buying a business because I was really curious to see if all these opinions and trainings I did for people around leadership and management, if they really worked. So, and I knew they did, but I really wanted to see how it would go under my own steam. So I bought a business. I bought a store here on Bainbridge, and did that for about 4 years. And after I sold that, I did a brief stint at Starbucks, only to realize that I really valued all the things that come with working for yourself. And so I went back to consulting, and then I talked to someone who was a coach, and I was like, what is that? And they told me what it was, and I was like, oh, I do that. I love that. I want to do that. So I went and signed up for a year-long training program and got certified to coach, and so grateful. Like, I really feel like I found work that totally matches what I love to do on the planet, and what I love seeing people have more peace and ease in their skin. And I love, we spend so many hours at work, so people having an empowered and, dare I say it, joyful relationship with their work, that's priceless.
Yeah. So would you mind going into some of the, I guess, either like the techniques or processes you go to help your clients become more comfortable at work and feel more empowered?
Yeah. So it's very individualized, and it's also, a lot of it is about limiting beliefs. So much of it is listening to someone and listen. I'm really deeply trained in listening for what gets in people's way. Mm-hmm. So much of our whole world live inside of stories, right? Like, there are very few. There's a little fable that I like to tell about a shoe company that sends back in the day, right? So they send 2 of their salespeople off on barges, and one sends a telegram back that says, I'm coming on the next barge back. Stop. No one wears shoes here. Stop. No opportunity. Stop. It's a shoe company. I don't know if I said that, but anyway.
Yeah.
So the next week they get the next message that says, I'm extending my trip by 2 months. Stop. No one wears shoes here. Stop. Endless opportunity. Stop. Right. And so, like, whatever beliefs we have about the world, we inherited from the people that brought us up in the world, from our culture, from the time when we were raised. Like, there's so many things that inform us that we just unconsciously walk around with as if it's fact. And most of the time it's not. And so fundamentally what I do is engage with people in a conversation that helps to shine a light on, hey, this isn't true. This is, what do you want to choose? And we have lots of tools. There's all kinds of ways to do this, and it all starts with a conversation. Mm-hmm. And it all starts with expanding my company, A Squared, is about awareness and action, right? Okay. So awareness, once you have an awareness that something could be different, and then you're able to choose something different. Mm-hmm. So
how do you, so I guess I say this because, everybody has